Welcome to Far From Over, Amazon Class Struggles and Union Organizing. For the past 5 years, the Socialist Project and Center for Social Justice have organized numerous events on the topic of digital capitalism, the gig economy, if we were to call it that, and class recomposition and struggle through their Capitalism Workshop series and to numerous educational forums sponsored by the Labor Committee. Today's event reflects this point of emphasis, and it is also a strategic organizing priority of the Socialist Project's Labor Committee. Indeed, one of the central political challenges of the left today is the organization of and support for the self-organization of workers across the sectors of digital capitalism into unions. Silicon Valley corporations such as Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft have quickly become one of the most powerful sectors of contemporary capitalism, if not the most powerful. And these and other corporations have been equally creative and vicious in keeping their operations all but free of unions. So one of the struggles to organize and unionize workers in big tech has recently centered on Amazon, the pivotal company in the new logistics of distribution and retail, and now one of the largest employers in the United States, next to Walmart and the Department of Defense. Significant class struggles have emerged at Amazon. Jeff Bezos, who's on track to become the world's first trillionaire, possesses a fortune greater than Morocco's $119 billion gross domestic product. And every hour, Bezos takes approximately 315 times the $28,000 median annual pay to Amazon workers. That class division and the inequity, in conjunction with the brutal conditions of work and labor in Amazon warehouses from Italy to Germany, from Bessemer to Brampton, has motivated workers to organize. Now, it was widely hoped that the recent pitched battle for union recognition at Bessemer, Alabama, would be a turning point in this Amazon workers' struggle, setting off a series of unions being formed elsewhere. If lessons are to be learned and new strategies taken up from the failed vote, it still may be. If there is to be a renewal of the union movement in working class politics in North America and beyond, Amazon is surely at the center of the firms of digital capitalism that the working class and all socialist organizations must strategize to conquer. So I'm really glad that many thoughtful people have joined us today to inform us about Amazon and capitalism and class struggle that's happening today. And we're going to start today with Alessandro Del Fonte, who's going to kick things off with about a 20-minute presentation. Alessandro teaches at the Institute of Communication, Culture, Information, and Technology at the U of T, and is the author of the forthcoming Pluto Press book, The Warehouse, Workers and Robots at Amazon. So after Alessandro's done, we're going to move on to a 1-hour roundtable discussion with some Amazon workers and organizers. And after that, there's going to be some time for some audience participation and Q&A. So thanks again for joining us today, and over to you, Alessandro.
Thank you, Tamner. I'm going to try and give sort of a bird view intro to some of the main features of Amazon and some of the things I think are getting in the way of organizing at Amazon, and some of the things that are actually functioning when it comes to organizing at Amazon. So I'm going to try to just give, again, sort of a broad kind of bird view of the situation there. So I've been doing research, especially in Italy, in the main fulfillment center warehouse in Ity, which is MXP5. That's the code name for it, and it happens to be my hometown. So there's some serendipity there in terms of why I started working at on Amazon and why I started doing research in that specific place. Maybe we'll talk about that. Actually, we will talk about that specific warehouse in a few minutes. I kind of wanted to start by mentioning ambitions of this company. So, private employer in the world, 1.5 give or take workers hired by Amazon directly, and then almost as many hired through temp agencies, especially to staff warehouses during seasonal peaks like Prime Day or Black Friday or Christmas. So the ambition of this company is like, okay, I should also mention the wealth approaching at this point, like Tanner said, 1 trillion in terms of value of this company, which is unprecedented in the history of capitalism. So the ambitions of this company go beyond the simple size, I think. So first of all, I want to say that it's probably trying to become the market pretty much in the same way in which, if you remember, Facebook tried to become the internet, like the one bottleneck through which all our online connections will take place. So Amazon is in a similar sense trying to become the market, not only because of the size, the number of customers, the number of commodities it sells, but also because of its ability to influence the market. So its ability to influence consumption. So basically making these increasingly unreasonable, fast, one-click consumerism standard across the globe. So this promise to deliver us commodities in 3 days, 24 hours, 2 hours maybe, which of course as effects that trickle down to what the workers experience inside the warehouses where the commodities are stored. Its ability to lobby, to avoid taxation, avoid labor laws and labor regulation, avoid environmental regulation, its ability to influence labor, not only in terms of the legal, let's say, side, but also in terms of the way in which Amazon has the organizational and technological ability to influence the way in which the labor process is shaped. And this, what they do certainly can and is already influencing other companies that are more and more adopting the similar technologies and also organizational techniques. So I think there is something about the ambitions of this company which goes beyond its size. It's also very differentiated, and it's very difficult to capture it in one single sort of snapshot. So we're very familiar with the e-commerce side. So a few hundred warehouses across the world, online commerce, you order something, and that through algorithms, your order trickles down to a warehouse where the order is retrieved, packed, and then shipped and finally delivered to you. This is certainly one of the biggest legs of Amazon, but it's not the only one. At the very least, we should mention Amazon Web Services, which is the biggest cloud computing service in the world, and it's strictly integrated with their e-commerce operations. It's their most profitable leg of the company. It also provides the infrastructure for many other companies. So this, again, when I'm talking about Amazon becoming the market, there is also something about providing the basic infrastructure for other retail companies or other companies, digitally native, so to speak. So for instance, Zoom runs on Amazon services. Uber runs on Amazon services. So Amazon provides the basic infrastructure for many other companies that we will sort of file under the umbrella term of digital capitalism. Amazon Web Services is also, again, strictly integrated with the technological organization of labor inside Amazon's warehouses. Of course, it provides the infrastructure not only for Uber, Zoom, and so on and so forth, but also for the e-commerce operations in-house, so to speak. Amazon develops surveillance technology to be used in the warehouse to surveil workers, and then sells similar technologies to third-party clients, including law enforcement and immigration agencies in the States, including final consumers who may want to purchase, AI-powered cameras to surveil the space around their home, or even drones to surveil the space around their homes. So there is something about, it's also a major cultural producer at this point. So producing mostly TV content. So anyway, a very huge beast, very difficult to capture it in a single conversation. I think very difficult to understand it as a whole, in a sense. Although it has to be, we need to strive to understand it as a whole, I think. I want to mention it's the result of three major social and economic crises. So it's the product of what Naomi Klein will call disaster capitalism. So the dot-com, the burst of the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s. Amazon is one of the few mid-sized actors that managed to survive and to grow even more roots. So they managed to basically collect enough investment to kind of float, while many other companies were gone bankrupt and being pushed out of the market. It's also the product of, I think, the 2008, 2009 recession, which is a moment where Amazon grows in size in terms of workforce. So there's more availability of people willing to take up precarious jobs in Amazon warehouses, and also there is a labor laws, especially I think in Europe, becoming more flexible and allowing them to hire people more easily. And then, of course, third major crisis is the coronavirus crisis, as we're all familiar with this. So the coronavirus crisis, because of people's need to purchase stuff online because of stay-at-home orders and blah blah blah, Amazon all of a sudden grows in size in a very fast way, not only in terms of profits but also in terms of workforce. So I think they have hired over 200,000, ballpark, over 200,000 people, new workers in the last year to cope with the increasing demand. So not only increased consumption, also increased availability again of sort of what Marx would have called the reserve army willing to take up one of those jobs. So I think we've seen in the last few years quite a few examples of people trying to resist Amazon and organize against it, especially in warehouses, especially in reaction to widespread surveillance, widespread precarity, despotic management, and also very important, the rhythms of work. So the injury rates, rhythms of work, I think we'll talk about that with the Amazon workers we have today, I hope. A few, I think I still have 10 minutes or something like that. So I'm going to go through a few, I think, main or my own, I think, 3 or 4 kind of features of how Amazon deals with workers that I think could be useful to understand some of the major obstacles in the way of organizing at Amazon. Number one, Amazon sees its workforce as disposable. So it's a major accelerator of precarity wherever it arrives. In some areas, in some warehouses in the United States, it's been calculated that the turnover approaches 100%, or even higher than 100% per year, which means that on average, people, and here we're talking about full-time associates, not about the temp seasonal workers. On average, people last 1 year. So they have a politics of not only using a flexible workforce by using a dual employment model. So like I said, there's a core of workers hired full-time by Amazon, and then there is pretty much as many hired through temp agencies like Adecco or Manpower. So in MXP5, the one where I'm most familiar with, we're talking about 3,000 workers overall when the warehouse works at top speed. So, December especially, because of Black Friday and then Christmas. Of those people, 1,500 are actually hired full-time by Amazon. 1,500 are hired especially by Adecco and Manpower to staff the warehouse for weeks, maybe months if they're lucky. We just learned a few days ago that Amazon has an explicit policy to fire. So managers are actually have to respond to these metrics. How many people did you hire and how many people did you fire? And that's something that's actually valued when they are evaluated inside the company. So I kind of call the system Amazon has built around these very fast turnover cycles, planned precarity, pretty much like planned obsolescence for digital gadgets. But we all know that if we buy a phone, it's built to last for a couple of years, and then for different reasons, we'll have to buy a new one. So the companies actually build a sort of like a certain life cycle into the technology itself. So I think it's very similar with Amazon workers. The company knows there are certain life cycles that workers where workers are productive enough to stay in the warehouse and be useful and generate enough value for Amazon. So Amazon will do anything to increase the turnover, or at least manage these very fast turnover cycles. Certainly an obstacle to organizing. So in an interview I did with an Amazon workers, they told me, actually an organizer in an Amazon warehouse, they told me when they've been here long enough to become agitated, they've also been here long enough to quit. So very difficult, as we know from the history of organizing in other industries, very difficult to organize a workforce that changes constantly. So not only the people hired through temp agencies, but also full-time workers, like I said, go through these very fast turnover cycles. Amazon again will pay you to leave, will give you extra money to leave after a couple of years. So every year you spend at Amazon working during a peak, which means the fall, all the way until the end, they will give you $1,000 or 1,000 euros to quit your job. Especially important in countries where they can't just fire people at will. So especially important in Europe. So they will pay you to leave. They will pay you to get an education, not to train you to kind of go up the ladder at Amazon, but rather to find a better job outside of the company. So they will actually pay, I think, 90%, I may be wrong, of certain educational programs to their workers to kind of foster them to quit. So precarity and workforce being seen as disposable. There's another main obstacle is the widespread system of workplace surveillance that Amazon deploys in its warehouses and outside of its warehouses. So certainly another obstacle to workplace democracy. So we're talking especially about monitoring productivity, making sure that workers keep up with the pace dictated by algorithms and robots, so the technologies they work with. So the most basic, such technology is the barcode scanner that they use to scan the commodities you either store or retrieve from the shelves. So pretty much like a gig economy phone app. I'm sure most people are familiar with this. Amazon workers tend to walk around the aisles of the warehouse with a barcode scanner, pretty much the kind of technology you see used in a supermarket to scan barcodes when you buy something, right? So the screen of the scanner will tell you where to go and what to retrieve. Go to second floor, aisle X, cell K49, and retrieve this coffee mug that I have ordered. So the scanner is used to assign tasks to workers to organize the labor process, but also to monitor, strictly monitor the productivity in terms of rhythms of work. How many items did you store or retrieve per hour? Have you met the targets set by management? Increasingly unreasonable targets. Have you picked 100 items per hour? Have you stored 80 items or 120 items per hour? It also monitors breaks. I think people may be familiar with this. So because the first thing an Amazon worker does is scan its own badge to log into the system, the scanner is kind of linked to what this person does. So if you go to the bathroom, you have to log off. And then log in again, and that is counted as time off task. And management can use that to kind of like discipline you. The scanner also mediates between workers and management. So, for instance, the scanner can be used to call a worker to go at the workstation where supervisors work for a one-to-one meeting where they will be told that they're too slow or they took too much time off task. The scanner also surveils ideological compliance with Amazon's corporate culture. So workers are constantly asked, do you feel positive? Do you like the management you're working with? Please project loving energy onto the robots you're working with. Workers are constantly polled, and they have to answer questions constantly. to kind of keep them in check in terms of compliance with the ideological or the corporate culture, let's say, that Amazon builds. And again, we could talk about this forever. And then, of course, more mundane things like widespread cameras, body scanners you have to go through every time you enter or exit the peak tower, so that the place, the area of the warehouse where the commodities are stored. So every time you go to the bathroom, or maybe not to the bathroom, but every time you go to take a break, you have to go through. You have to walk back through body scanners. And then there is like more traditional union busting techniques that also get in the way of specifically organizing. So I think we've seen so much, I think, basic stuff like supervisors spying on union organizers, but also Amazon hiring the Pinkerton agency to monitor organizers, Amazon spying on social media pages used to organize workers, Amazon managing to talk the mayor of Bessemer into changing the cycles of a specific traffic light so that incoming workers driving their cars wouldn't stop there for too long because organizers were using the traffic light to hand out flyers. So I think there is something about the surveillance, this kind of panopticon that Amazon has built around technology, but also around specific managerial techniques. And I don't think we have time to explore all of them, but I think it's an interesting point to maybe look at that. The third point, the use of technology to displace workers. While Amazon is growing its workforce, at the same time, it's also using its major technological firepower to develop technology that may allow it to, if not reduce the number of workers it employs, certainly increase their productivity or monitor them even more closely. So there will be lots of examples in terms of, one of my favorite ones is augmented reality goggles. Imagine you're a supervisor wearing this headset, and when you look at a worker, the headset uses face recognition technology to identify the worker and then projects on top of your natural visual field information about that worker. What do they need? How fast they are? Their status, which may be which may have to do with this kind of ideological compliance we were talking about. So this is a patent Amazon owns, for instance. There will be many others that have to do with increasing the rate of workplace surveillance and increasing Amazon's ability to break down the labor process, increase productivity, and use workers to, make sure that workers collaborate with machines, with the machinic organization of the labor process in the warehouse. So I think I have to start wrapping this up. I'm super happy to talk about all this stuff. I kind of wanted to mention something that happened at MXP5. Again, this big fulfillment center in Piacenza, which is my hometown, last month. So there was it's an interesting place in terms of worker organizing because it's one of the first ones that actually managed to unionize. Of course, the laws are very different in Europe, so you don't need to drop cards, you don't need to hold a vote. You can, if 3 people decide they want to join a union, that's about it. You can join a union. Then it's a bit more complicated when it comes to officially representing workers inside a certain workplace, but it's much easier, of course, than it is in North America. Anyway, so MX5 has become the center of sort of a labor union civil war, whereas different unions with different ideologies, different tactics have managed to organize parts of the workforce. So in that place, you kind of see on a daily basis at work in the wild, so to speak, some of the different approaches we may discuss today to organizing Amazon workers. They are one of the first warehouses where workers have won some concessions, especially in terms of work freedoms and flexibility. So, for instance, organization of the shifts, and also like minor financial bonuses, very minor, but some money. One of the very it's not the only one anymore. I think one place in Spain just won something very similar. But what's interesting is that you have the kind of traditional mainstream center-left unions, and then you have the neo-fascist union, which is something unique to certain European countries, of course. And then you have a radical, more autonomist union that's trying very hard to enter the warehouse to change especially to change the tactics that the more mainstream unions have been using. So there is something about a wealth of different approaches. I'm super happy to discuss more in detail in one single warehouse. So I was mentioning the fact that a month ago something happened there. I think it's an interesting example. There was a strike. There was a national strike across the entire supply chain or distribution chain. I think it was the first time that workers managed to mobilize people across an entire company that's so complex as Amazon is. So you had, at the very least, the warehouses going on strike, the delivery workers going on strike, so the people who drive the trucks, who do the last mile kind of work of delivering the package to your door, and then even the call center going on strike. So I think there is something interesting there, because while some people have identified the warehouse as the choke point of logistics, you can stop there. You can stop a warehouse. You can maybe have a major effect. Amazon is doing its best to counter that possibility of being of a single warehouse being a choke point. So they're in all countries, they're building networks of warehouses where they can reshuffle orders. So you can slow it down, but the orders will be delivered if one workplace stops and another one 50 kilometers away or 100 kilometers away or 10 kilometers away is still working. So mobilizing across the entire distribution chain, not only across the warehouses, but also across other, across the entire division of labor of the e-commerce operations, I think was partially successful. So I think I'm over my time now. I'm gonna stop here. I could go on and on and on for hours. So I think I need to stop here, and I'm super happy to go more in detail into any of this if during the roundtable or if there is any question. Sorry for being a little late.
No, you're right on time, Alessandro. Thanks so much. And I'm going to use my clap emoji. Thanks so much, Alessandro. For your contextualization of how Amazon has become very much embedded in so many other sectors of contemporary capitalism. I mean, we also remember it's like a vertically integrated conglomerate with an entertainment wing even, and so much else. And thanks also for offering a systematic overview of the major persuasive and coercive techniques and technologies Amazon has built and operationalized to deter, prevent, and diminish the power of workers to organize and fight back. I'm really looking forward to your forthcoming Pluto Press book, The Warehouse Workers and Robots at Amazon. And as I know from the tradition that you're coming from, you're also focusing on worker agency and struggle. And so while Amazon's doing everything it can to disunite and disorganize workers, workers are also building, engaging in forms of collective action. And so on that note, we're really grateful that 2 Amazon workers engaged in this struggle have joined our event today. So let's shift gears now to the roundtable portion of our event with Paul Gray and Jessica Ireland in conversation with Alessandro and Amazon workers and organizers Ira and Fathia. First of all, Paul Gray teaches in the Department of Labor Studies at Brock University and is currently doing a lot of work on gig economy organizing and the different strategies and tactics that involves. Jessica Ireland is a graduate student at York University. Ira lives in Queens, New York City, and has worked at an Amazon delivery station for over a year and a half and is co-founder of Amazonians United. And I'll sort of post the link to that in the chat bar in just a moment. And Fathia has been an Amazon worker in Maryland for 6 months and is in the process of forming an organizing committee with her coworkers to organize around issues in their workplace. So a very, very warm welcome to all of you. And thanks again for participating in today's event. So I'll turn it over now to Jessica and Paul to start the roundtable discussion that will go on for about an hour. Okay, thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanner. And thanks, Alessandro, for that presentation as well. So the first thing I wanted to ask is just what effect the recent loss at Bessemer has had on Amazon workers, if any.
I can speak to the effect it's had in not only my warehouse, but some of the other warehouses that we organize with. And at least in my experience, the answer is not that much. I think I think leftists and like activists, we tend to get more caught up in certain aspects of the news than a lot of everyday coworkers do. And I think I'd say there's a subset of my coworkers, quite a small subset, who was watching the union election quite closely, and hopefully, but a much larger portion, it wasn't that much on their radar. And I would even say that the coworkers who like form our committee and take action with us, even amongst them, there wasn't the same degree of like following every step in the process that you might have expected if you follow labor news in social media or otherwise. So the impact hasn't been that great, either positive or negative, of the sort of the Bessemer effect. In terms of my coworkers, though, it has had some positive impacts in sort of highlighting the situation at Amazon and getting more people interested in organizing Amazon. So while in the area immediately around me, it hasn't been super pronounced, we have had an increase in people like reaching out to us, people sort of viewing the way we organize as an alternative that might have a better chance of success. So I'd say in terms of people reaching out to us, including other workers, it's been a positive effect that way. But in terms of coworkers immediately around me, it hasn't been that noticeable.
Yeah, and I can just speak to my warehouse, just with my coworkers personally. I would say of the coworkers that a lot of them had heard vaguely about the election. A lot of them weren't following it, but some did ask to kind of go over like what happened there. And we had a discussion about it in an organizing committee meeting. And I wouldn't say it was super discouraging to people, mostly because that we talked about what the approach was of RWDSU and how that's different from what we're doing right now. And people, even though they had heard about the loss, they kind of understood the pressure that Amazon puts on people. And we talked about, how they were harassing people pretty, at home and at work about not voting for the union. And they, we get that kind of harassment at work all the time, not anti-union harassment per se, but just a lot of constant communication from the company. And so they understood how that could kind of sway workers. But so far, my coworkers have not seen really what we're doing as something that will be dampened by that loss, because we're kind of fighting for ourselves and trying to change the power dynamic between ourselves and our management. And it's like pretty impossible for them to frame this as an outside union trying to come in and change things in our workplace, because it's really just us complaining about what is actually affecting us directly. And so I think that Amazon doesn't have a great response for that kind of thing right now. So yeah, I would say my experience with my coworkers has been similar to Ira, where the loss has it's something that we discussed, but it hasn't greatly dampened anyone's spirits or anything like that.
Hi, folks. Really glad to be a part of this. The next question we have is, what are some of the most common issues that Amazon workers are agitated about?
Mandatory overtime.
Mandatory overtime. A lot of or lack of control over our schedule. Like we have set schedules, but Amazon sends out mandatory overtime all the time. And sometimes they'll do it with like 1 or 2 days notice. The other thing that's really big is speed up, just the rate of work and understaffing.
Mandatory overtime was the first thing that workers at MXP5 in Piacenza managed to keep under control after their first strike. For temp workers, it's a different game, because they can be just, they have to fight for their contract renewal, so they're much more under threat of losing their job, but for full-timers, that is almost gone. Yeah.
I would be interested in what keeping it under control means.
One thing
they have obtained from the company to recognize that mandatory overtime is illegal, and that they're not going to be asked to nothing is going to happen if they don't want to work overtime.
Oh, that's great.
For people, you know, as you know, for people hired by a temp agency, it's much more difficult. Also because the kind of contracts they work through allow for greater flexibility for the employer. But for full-time, for the blue badges or the full-timers, the situation has changed quite a bit, I think.
So yeah, the next question that I have is, a lot of us have seen leaked anti-union videos that Amazon has produced. How effective are those, and are there other kinds of proactive union avoidance techniques deployed by the company, and how effective are they?
Mine is short, so I'll just say we haven't had any mention from our management at all of unions. We haven't heard anything at all. I've been, at first, when I first started organizing, I was very secretive and tried to be really quiet about it. And now I don't even really, I kind of openly talk about organizing in the break room, and we haven't had any real pushback from management. The only thing we have had, which is cool, is that we were organizing a petition around a particular issue, and management heard that we were signing a petition, and they just changed. They just gave in to our demand immediately. And so our work now is messaging it as a win, because they're saying that they just decided to do this by themselves. But so other than that, we haven't had any kind of like anti-union messaging. I have seen the anti-union video, but they haven't shown it to us at our workplace.
Yeah, they haven't shown us anything like that either. Although we have in our workplace, we did a series of walkouts last year, early in the pandemic, and management and HR, they did come pretty hard for one of our main organizers. Like they brought in a guy who's regional loss prevention officer, and he introduced himself as ex-FBI, and then he took one of our lead organizers and interrogated him for an hour and 40 minutes in a separate room. And we ended up being able to file an unfair labor practice complaint successfully with the National Labor Relations Board. And it took like a year for them to settle. But the federal government did find explicitly that Amazon, in doing so, they were explicitly violating our right to organize. And they had to post like a little poster, a very small flyer in the break room, essentially saying we did a bad thing, y'all can organize. Since then, management we've also like, the more power we build in the workplace, the more management, like the lower level management, like really walks on eggshells and tries to like be really nice. But I know that they're just trying to sort of diffuse organizing, but while the higher ups, make plans. But we don't see anything explicitly anti-union ever since that first retaliation event.
Okay, great. Another question we had was, how would you describe the organizing model or approach taken by Amazonians United, and how is it different or similar to other Amazon worker organizing efforts?
We use a model of organizing, solidarity unionism, specifically minority unionism, meaning if you look at what happened in Bessemer, there was 700, 800 people who voted to have a union, and they voted to have a union in the face of pretty, as we've heard, like pretty severe repression like by the company. And that's 700 people that, if we're organizing in the warehouse, we should be viewing as folks who are willing to take action with us, whether it's sign a petition, whether it's do a walkout. Those are folks that we would want to be reaching out to in that warehouse, and we wouldn't be asking the government's permission to act like a union. We'd be identifying supporters. We'd be building up our organizational capacity. Doing barbecues together, doing small workplace actions that gradually escalate, get people to see that when we stand together, we make change. Because like 700 people taking action in a warehouse can make some improvements in that warehouse. And then you'll have, the 1,000 people who didn't vote one way or the other start seeing that, and they start becoming supporters as well. So we don't need Uncle Sam or the company to tell us it's all right for us to be a union. We view ourselves as a union, and we grow by acting as a union.
Yeah, I don't have anything major to add to that. Just that, like Ira said, that I think mainly that right now, at least in my warehouse, we're focusing on organizing actual actions to kind of demonstrate to our coworkers that it's okay to take action. You can take action, and as long as we're all together and we're supporting each other, that's the kind of thing that can change things, and they can't retaliate against all of us if we're really solid in our organizing.
Okay, that kind of ties into the next question that we had here as well, which is, in your opinion, how important is it that Amazon workers win union representation, and how optimistic are you about the potential of non-union forms of workers' organizations, so things like action centers and other things, and how do you see non-union organizing efforts relating to union organizing efforts, if at all?
I can very quickly say that I think that with Amazon we have the both examples. So North America, no union presence. Europe, lots of FCs which have union representation, and I think the union presence in Europe has been useful to at least partially normalize the despotic managerial techniques, the rhythms of work, or the kind of flexibility built into things like the mandatory overtime or these new mega cycles. So they've been useful in terms of containing Amazon. They haven't really won much else. So there is something about certainly like a seed of workplace democracy, certainly seeds in terms of winning actual rights and benefits and improvements. It's more about normalizing the situation, though, rather than anything revolutionary. But this is because most of the unions that have a presence in European warehouses tend to be sort of kind of center-left moderate unions. So their goals tend to be limited. Their tactics tend to be limited. In Italy, so in several countries, there is like this sort of like union civil war they mentioned in my hometown in terms of different ideas of how you could maybe use more radical tactics, and maybe you could fight for something a little bit different than what they're fighting for. But certainly, at least the normalization part is starting to happen, I think, in Europe.
Can I just, I guess, follow up if Ira and Fatia, not to like put you on the spot, but in the American context, like, do you see there being, because you're talking about kind of non-union things, so do you see there being any, do you think that it's important at all? Is there any role for emphasizing on unions, or is there strategic reasons, or have you tried working with unions, and do you have any experience there? Like, how do you kind of view unions and non-unions in your experience, I guess?
I really think that kind of depends on what your definition of a union is, because what we as our kind of organizing committee and our warehouse have been talking about is kind of like what is a union, and what is how were unions made legal in the first place in this country. It's become, it was very difficult and illegal to organize a union for a long time, and that was overcome by workers taking action together and coordinating strikes. So it now again has become very difficult to organize a union. It's maybe not exactly the same, but it's there's a lot of bureaucracy and slowing down of the process and ways to kill the momentum of organizing a union now that make it much harder to actually like go to a union election and win a union election. So what we've been talking about is, you know, do we need the government to certify that we're a union before we decide that we're a union? And what we're talking about in our warehouse is how you know, the kind of approach that RWDSU took. You know, obviously they were facing a lot of difficult, you know, repression from the company and just like generally like the situation for unions in the U.S. and in general. But we know that didn't work. And so in order to deal with a company as big as Amazon, it's, you know, going to take kind of workers building their power and taking action and also reaching out to other warehouses and coordinating with those other warehouses in order to really make any kind of real changes. And so I would say, I mean, in terms of like working with unions, you know, there are a lot of allies that we have that work in current like established unions that are kind of leftist union staffers that, you know, support us in various ways, but we don't officially work with any particular union as Amazonians United. I don't know if Ira had anything to add to that.
No, that's really good. We view ourselves as a union. We're a small union, we're a growing union, but we view being a union as a process of developing the agency of our coworkers and ourselves. We view things like elections or strikes or, you know, elections are just one tactic we might have that can serve the broader purpose of increasing the agency of our coworkers. And it's something that we will certainly entertain as a tactic in the future, along with, you know, strikes. If we look at it and think, yes, doing this will in fact help us develop organizationally, help our coworkers feel like they're part of the process, help coworkers, you know, step into that role. But the thing about unions in the US that a lot of folks outside of the US don't realize is that our union bureaucracies are orders of magnitude larger than most union bureaucracies throughout the world. And our contracts that tend to be negotiated, they negotiate things down to like the most minuscule point, that to the extent that like they don't establish like a minimum threshold of how good things should be. They establish, you know, exactly the way things are supposed to be. And if they're not like that, you're supposed to grieve it. You're supposed to work now and grieve later. And then it has to go through this whole bureaucratic process. And that's just not really how we try to do things. And I think even the process of getting a contract like that would require developing so much like organizational capacity in terms of our coworkers willing to have an inside game to run an election and get everyone to vote yes. I mean, that's even getting to that point to where we can execute that tactic is like such a lift that, you know, when we have the capacity to decide if we want to use that tactic, we'll use it. But I mean, we'll make that decision. But for now, it's just building the, you know, agency and sense of being in control of the process by our coworkers.
On that note, I was wondering if maybe you could, and this is directed to any of our panelists, if you could speak to some of the specific kind of actions in which you've engaged. How did you choose which issue to focus on? What was some of the thinking behind that? How did you choose which tactic or activity that you were going to engage in? What was the thinking about that? How does this contribute to this idea of solidarity unionism?
I mean, we determine issues kind of mostly through listening to our coworkers and like being really, situated on the line and sort of getting a sense for what folks are griping about, sort of like developing an idea sort of informally, but then kind of testing that hypothesis, being like, okay, it seems like speed up is a problem. I'm going to now go around and ask 20 coworkers what they think of the rate of work. So a lot of it's just the process of being in there. You learn what the issues are, and then you test those hypotheses out, see if like folks care about them. We even do surveys where, like, if we have an idea of like 10 issues that might be important, we'll do a formal survey and ask people to select their top 3. And then we'll ask something like, which of these do you feel most strongly about? We also try to select issues that range from like degrees of winnability. So something you can win at the individual warehouse or department level. Like in Chicago, the first action like that started Amazonians United was lack of clean water during a heat wave. Very easy to fix on the warehouse level, but people felt very deeply about. Sometimes there might be an issue that's not even on people's radar, like they don't know it's an issue till they know it's an issue. So like we were being illegally denied paid safe and sick leave last year, before the pandemic even started, where New York City has a law that requires every company to have accrual rates for paid safe and sick leave. And we were being denied that. So that was actually the first petition we did. And like Fatea mentioned, when Amazon realized that we had that on a petition, they gave in right away. And they tried to frame it as like, oh, we were auditing our books and we realized that we accidentally forgot to give you guys paid sick leave. And like when we confronted them on it, they were like, well, we didn't know we were in New York City. So yeah, we mostly by listening to our coworkers, selecting things that have various levels of winnability so we can mobilize more and more people as we go, but also suggesting things that might not be on people's radar initially.
I kind of wanted to mention that also in the example I know the most in my hometown, there was a very similar issue with the company not giving people the kind of raise that goes with the contract, with the national contract the company was using to hire, like at the time, 1,500 people. And this is not a lot. It's like maybe 50 euros a month after 2 years or something like that. But the company just denied that was something they had to do by law. And then after the strike, they did it, but they portrayed that as them kind of handing out extra money because they were good to the workers, not them just complying with the law, because the strike kind of forced them to, and the unions had realized finally there was something going on there. So very similar. I kind of wanted to, if I can ask a question to also, I wonder if people have been following what other kind of workers across the division of labor at Amazon, like the engineers and the more white-collar workers in Seattle especially, have been doing. So I'm talking about, for instance, the Amazon employees against climate change. That may not be the correct name. So they very interestingly kind of repurposed some of the company slogans in their favor. So for instance, they said, we're not customer obsessed if we don't care about climate change. I think it's a very, with these big multinational companies who have this need to kind of like keep on building their brand through these more kind of ideological tactics of like, for instance, having a certain slogan or a certain image or public image. I was wondering whether Amazonians United had been doing anything in terms of either fighting this image or subverting this image somehow. I hope my question was clear.
Okay, do you have anything on that point? I mean, we make jokes about, because one of Amazon's slogans is like "Work hard, make history." We make jokes about how we're making history, but or, you know, our goal is to make history, but not how Amazon wants. But we haven't done all that as well as the Amazon Employees for Climate Justice folks. They're really sharp with that.
Yeah, I think that is cool how they've done that. I don't think in our warehouse in particular because I would say most people are very cynical about the company's message, because it's so obvious. They say one thing and then they do the opposite. They say, oh, we care so much about you and we care so much about our customers or whatever, but they don't actually, it's all about speed and all about, pushing us to turn over, to quit, and so that they can get new, fresh people in. And that obviously ends up, when you're speeding everything up, it ends up, there's a lot of packages that are damaged and things that don't make it to people. And, it's just very obvious to folks in the warehouse that Amazon, has this face, but that the reality is very different. And so it's hard to take any of their kind of slogans seriously. I know that our managers, when they put up their bios, they have which of Amazon's slogans are their favorite, and so the ones that are always put customer obsession are always the most annoying managers.
We did during the early days of the pandemic, during the George Floyd uprisings, Amazon made this big statement about Black Lives Matter. And, they printed out and designed some Juneteenth t-shirts and distributed them in the warehouse. And Amazon's workforce is primarily people of color in the US. A lot, most of our committees are, women of color, and they felt quite insulted by Amazon, trying to create this public image of caring about Black lives when, they were literally at the same time, not during the curfew in New York City, during the uprisings, they weren't even relaxing the attendance policy for people who couldn't get to work through the police curfew, holding down, subway stations, and they were writing people up for missing work. So we did a big Juneteenth rally.
I think we just have one more question before we open it up. So it's just, what kind of coordination exists among Amazon workers in the US and internationally?
I can very quickly say that there are, I think at least 2 international networks of organizations fighting Amazon. So Amazon is United being one of them, I think, and our guest will explain that. There is another network organized by UniGlobal, which is a sort of umbrella organization for unions globally, service unions globally. So in Canada, you would have QPW. In Italy, you would have CGL, a certain branch of CGL, SCEU from the States. So through this Amazon Campaign Network, they used to organize bi-yearly global meetings of especially union organizers working at Amazon. But what they do is mostly sharing experiences, discussing possible strategies, and then lobbying. So it's more of a lobbying organization, if you wish. But they do connect, let's say, mainstream unions from all over the world. And then in the States, there is Athena, which is another umbrella organization, but that's more, I want to say, community oriented. So it tackles Amazon from a variety of angles. So it's a coalition of worker centers, NGOs, worker collectives, again tackling Amazon from a variety, from the environmental viewpoint, from the labor viewpoint, you name it, from the taxation viewpoint. I think it's mostly in the States, and then Amazonians United is a little bit of a different game. So I'm going to stop here, but at least 2 other global organizations, I think, or coalitions.
Ira and Fateh, do either one of you want to come in on this?
Oh, we're members of Amazon Workers International. We're sort of the U.S. affiliates of Amazon Workers International, which is actually, again, some of them are on the call, and in the next section, you know, when we open it up, they can speak more to that than I could. But yeah, we had, you know, we sent some like delegates over to Europe to, you know, convene with our European comrades, and they come from various different unions. But our coordination is sort of in its embryonic stages. We, you know, we all are in our respective countries doing our respective things, but recognizing that Amazon is transnational and can shift goods across borders to, you know, stop disruptions in one place. So we need to organize internationally as well.
Okay, then I think on that note, we will turn it back to Tanner. That was great. Thank you very much for those really insightful questions. I'm looking forward to hearing some of the other questions and what folks from around the world have to say.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Jessica, Paul, Ira, and Fathia. Now we're going to shift over to more of a participatory audience question and answer and comment session. So I already actually have two people on the speakers list that have, I think the first would be from our comrade Magda, who I think was making a comment during the session that sounded quite relevant to the international questions.
Yeah, it was sort of a comment about labor unions and basically like organizing in Amazon, because yeah, indeed we actually have unions here in Europe, even in Poland, but we also hit limits, even having this formal organization, and it gives us a lot of opportunities to challenge Amazon somehow, but we cannot cross some limits that we have that we face. And on the other hand, like in US, there's no this formal organization, but like during a pandemic, for us it was obvious, but to have a union is not it's not enough. Like Amazon didn't want to listen to us, even if we have this formal organization. And then like some other things happens, like they couldn't ignore, for example, that like at the beginning of pandemic, 70% of Polish workforce didn't come to work because they were scared. So they had to figure out something, how to push people to come back to work. And at the same time, like workers in the US, they organized those walkouts, and they couldn't ignore this kind of organizing. And I think that they were shocked because people started to organize even without any formal organization. And it pushed them to answer our demands. We had like common demands that time, basically focus on health and safety, but also on hazard pay. And they agreed and they implied to our warehouses like the things that we demanded. Like, for example, in US, it was very important to check temperature of workers, and they didn't do that in US, and they also didn't do that in Poland. And then in Chicago, they organized those walkouts, and also in New York, to also demanding this thing, and they did it. Although there was no formal organization behind it. Basically, we think, like me personally, I think today that we still got some changes in organization, which was also and the improved safety of the warehouses thanks to Amazon workers who took part in walkouts in US. So we use different tools. In Europe, we have this tool. We can like simply it's not simply, but we can organize union maybe in more simple way than in US, but we don't have the tools that US workers have. For example, for us in Poland, it's much more difficult to organize such a walkout. But I don't know if it's basically so. We can talk that the union is the aim, but sometimes it's not. I mean, like maybe you don't have it in US. Maybe you have different tools and you can use it. And in pandemic, actually in the US, you show that you can be very strong without this formal organization. So maybe it's not the point to focus on that. And we have it at the same time, we have it in Poland, but we are also, it's really limited. And it's also limited for people because when they have union, they also they try to stick to the law. I mean, that workers, they say that, oh, if there's the union, try to do everything legally. But it's like Amazon, it's for them, it's so simple to maneuver with this like legal things, but it's not so simple for them to, to deal with workers who like spontaneously organize walkout. So this is what I wanted to say, that maybe there's no point to focus on this like legal things so much, because you have some tools to organize, and I think that you are very strong in US, and you show it last year, and we can also achieve something here thanks to your walkouts. And that time, like a year ago, we tried to do like a lot of things internationally, like or transnationally. And it was very important. So now we should continue this transnational exchange, and this is something that Amazon is very scared of and cannot ignore, whatever if we do it as a union or not.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Magda. Much appreciated, and insightful on the international question as well. I've got a few other speakers on the list. So I think I have Donald Schwartz. Donald, you're welcome to unmute yourself and make a comment or ask the questions you have for the panelists.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks to the presenters for a great start. And I would like to also add that I think the broad strategy of Amazonians United is a welcome breath of fresh air into the labor movement. At the same time, I like to know a bit more about how Amazonians United is organized. Do they actually have members, a dues structure? How do they choose their leadership?
I was just going to say I'm a newer member of Amazonians United, so Ira can actually speak to this more than I can. But because there's so much turnover in Amazon, there's not a plan right now to have like people officially join as members and pay dues and that kind of thing. But it's a bit more informal in terms of how our kind of decision making is. It's more kind of regional, but there are leaders of different regions that are elected by the folks that are active in the network, but we are in the process of kind of bringing in more of our coworkers to be connected with other Amazonians United members and other warehouses.
Yeah, it's very, because it's like so much of the process of building this type of power is getting people to like recognize themselves as, sort of agents of change, and to like conceptualize a union as collective action, not something that shows up on a paper. Our membership is largely like, if we want to define it formally, it's based entirely around these committees that we form. And these are folks who like, after we've been taking action and building together, it's like, we do ask, like we're committee, like we ask for folks to like start viewing themselves as committee. We've also we've kind of experimented here and there, especially in Chicago, with like dues paying structures. But like in terms of people actively identifying as Amazonians United, that's largely when we get to a certain point and people start, feeling like it's something they're building, and they make an explicit commitment, like I am a committee member of Amazonians United. But we don't like go around collecting dues. We do fundraisers. We have in various places experimented a little bit with dues paying, but also like when we do events, we just ask people to pitch in as well. We've done fundraisers, both public facing and inside the warehouse, for various things. But right now, in terms of, other than like the regional captains, the organization is informal enough, and like our meetings with our committees tend to be small enough that decision making is pretty informal. I think as we grow more, I would say even in the Northeast, we're starting to sort of have this question of maybe electing delegates to sort of like meet up as like a, regional body. But it hasn't been super salient because we've been pretty small.
Jeff, you're up.
Thanks. You hear me okay? Maybe someone would want to talk about how the organizers are dealing with the conditions of like 100% turnover at the warehouses. Are you leading with leafleting or community events or carrying out systemized one-on-ones? Which tactics the Amazonians are finding effective in building, their organization in atomized places like these warehouses? I'm just curious about all that.
I would just say, like I said, I'm a newer member. I've only been in my warehouse for 6 months, so the turnover question hasn't affected our location as much yet. There is quite a bit of turnover. A lot of people have left, but they hadn't really started to hire new people until maybe this week or last week. So the folks that were still left over from before were just kind of, we already had been organizing together for a bit. They're really putting a lot of pressure on people now to leave, so I think that I'm soon going to be facing the issue of turnover. But I will say that so I'm in a delivery station, but in our region, there's also a fulfillment center that it's much harder to get to if you're in fulfillment center in your department to get to workers in other departments. So we have in that location been partnering with a local organization that has kind of deep community ties in the Baltimore area. We haven't yet done it, but we have a plan now to leaflet in neighborhoods where we know there are a lot of Amazon workers, that and possibly forming a committee of ex-Amazon workers that could help to do some of that stuff, reach out to community members and connect with current Amazon workers, and there's a lot of folks that also just work at Amazon seasonally or leave and come back, and so it's not there's that kind of building that kind of organization wouldn't necessarily mean that it's just ex-Amazon workers, but it could be occasional Amazon workers. And we have actually leafleted because it's a fulfillment center and, it's hard to kind of get to other people in different departments. We have leafleted out front. The worker that's kind of inside of the fulfillment center that is directly connected with Amazonians United did not leaflet. It was us, the rest of us that don't work directly in that location that came over and helped leaflet so that we wouldn't be identified. And that actually was a great experience. I mean, we leafleted for a couple of days and we I would say like 80% of the workers we spoke with gave us their contact information, which is, we worked for a union previously and done a lot of leafleting, and it was a much, much better kind of response than any leafleting I had done before. And they were able to kind of start building an organizing committee from that. So that has been a cool kind of experience, and we're planning on dealing with that in this area, or trying to deal with it through having some kind of like community support and organization that will outlast necessarily that you are working at Amazon, because I know in our organizing committee, folks that have left have expressed interest to me and still supporting the organizing work in one way or another.
We that's really cool, Fateh. I didn't know all that. That's super cool about the future plans. We do a bit of a combination. There's sort of like a few possible errors you can make. So like one thing we found is if we overly rely on like our newsletter or flyers, it makes organizing feel like almost like a technocratic thing that you need people with design skills and who can type up good flyers do, and people start overly relying on, you know, like a flyer that I make, and they'll hand that out and have that be a substitute for a one-on-one conversation. But we've been able to find that as long as like the flyers or the newsletters are not a substitute for the one-on-one conversations, they're a pretty good way to get like new people involved quickly. We do social events. We just went bowling last night. It wasn't huge. 12 coworkers came. We've had a barbecue where 55 coworkers came. But the main thing is when people start engaging in struggle, work becomes meaningful for them. And when they start feeling like they've got family at work, work is less terrible to show up to. So the people who we successfully draw into organizing tend to stick around longer. And, you know, if you talk to them, they'll be very upfront that the reason they're sticking around is to stay in the struggle. So the turnover question is, in my view, it's a combination of building relationships based upon, you know, shared leisure, but also shared struggle, giving people a reason to stick around. And it works pretty well, at least for the core of our committee and people in the periphery of that.
So if I may jump in, that's very interesting. That's I hadn't thought about the possibility that worker struggle actually reduces turnover somehow. In my experience, especially in Europe, I think I've seen cases where I will kind of flip the picture a little bit in terms of workers who resist turnover, who are determined not to quit, maybe because they can't, they can't afford it, or maybe because they are stubborn. They decided in spite of whatever Amazon does to them, they're going to stick around and try to survive it and make a living out of Amazon and maybe retire at Amazon. So those are the ones, the old guard. Those are the ones who have joined unions more frequently, which also translate for mainstream unions. I think in Europe this is a common, because it's a very different from North America. I think it's a common issue across many countries in Europe. The kind of ethnic composition of the workforce has an impact on who suffers the most from turnover and who's more prone to actually joining a union. So I think we have countries where the white workforce that started a few years ago may join a union, and then the more racialized workforce that's been working at Amazon, increasingly so in the last few years, since Amazon has basically exploded, more difficult for mainstream unions to reach out to that part of the workforce. I think it's quite different in the States, of course, but I think I've seen this dynamic of like people's ethnicity maybe getting in the way of the union's ability to reach out to them and to involve them, which is ingrained in the way in which these unions function, of course. And turnover being like, I'll see it the other way in a sense. Those who refuse to participate in turnover, those who were willing to, work as a picker forever or be sent to one of these like punishment, areas or departments, and maybe they've been around for 6 years. Those are the ones who may tend to join a union more frequently in some cases.
Does anyone else have a question? Hey, welcome, Rebecca Keach. Glad that you're here.
Thank you very much. My question is there a lot of fear, or is it hard to get workers to be willing to take collective action for fear of getting fired or disciplined? And how do you address those concerns?
I would say yes, there is some concern about that, although the kind of way that Amazon very arbitrarily and it constantly fires people makes that fear kind of less relevant, because people can be fired for any reason at any time, and they know that. And so that's one of the things that's helpful to overcome that fear, because when people are afraid of being fired for taking collective action, we kind of remind them that they can also be fired for looking the wrong way at a manager. And they've seen it, kind of happen. So that resonates with people. There has been that kind of fear, but I think the thing that really helps people overcome that, I know that recently when we were getting folks to sign up for the petition, we had over 80% of the warehouse signed on the petition before, management kind of just gave in to the demand. And most people were very just so frustrated with the actual issue that they just kind of signed even without too much fear. But the people that were more afraid, their main concern was, that they could be retaliated against or fired, and that there would be no recourse. And it's been the way to get over that that's been most useful is just talking about how many people support this issue and how many people are together on this, and how much as long as we stick together and we support each other, we have each other's backs, that they can't target all of us. And that really resonates with people. It's something that they just kind of get inherently, that if we're all together. So people do have some concern about division among workers and, kind of little groups or infighting between workers. But that's been, at least in my warehouse, been fairly easy to overcome, because the committee is pretty representative of various groups within the warehouse. And if we're all kind of getting along with each other and pushing our people to have each other's backs and support each other, and recognize when it's management that's the problem and not allow management to turn us against each other, it's really, it helps people overcome that fear, because they see, who is the problem and who is being affected by the management, which is the problem. So yeah, I think just kind of really emphasizing the importance of collective action and working together, and the fact that management can't retaliate against all of us, because already they're pretty understaffed, and if even 10 of us were to together take action, it would be very difficult for them to replace us.
Yeah, we've had similar experience. I would say in the US, we do have one feature of our labor law that is kind of unique and good, which is protected concerted activity. And I try not to lean too heavy on telling people it's your right to do this, but it is true that if people start taking action together, their job security actually improves. If your name is on a petition and that petition gets handed into management, automatically, you're triggering legal protections for protected concerted activity. Now, Amazon will violate the law all the time. But generally, the first people they would try to retaliate against would be the leaders of these petitions. The people, I would often tell people, you can get fired now anytime if your name's on a petition. When we hand it in, you're part of a protected concerted activity. But more importantly, look how many people are on this petition. But I'll also point out that if anyone gets retaliated against first, it's going to be me or this other committee member. And we've been doing this for a while, and you see we're all still here. Another thing that helps is start with low risk things that people don't feel that scared about. And then one more thing, just lost my train of thought. Just the longer people are around, the more they're comfortable with it. And the more they say it's just kind of the way we do things here, people get on board pretty quick. So,
I know that there's no silver bullets for organizing, but is there any particular line or topic that seems to catch people when you're trying to get them interested in mobilizing or becoming part of an action? Is there a way that you can, or is there something that you say that flips the switch for them?
In our warehouse, what we've started doing we have weekly organizing committee meetings, and what we've started doing, and I've heard other organizing committee members mention this to other workers as well when they were getting folks signed on the petition. In our meetings, we at the beginning we talk kind of about like something personal about ourselves, like something, a hobby or whatever that makes us unique. And the reason for that, we very explicitly say, is that Amazon views us as numbers and as either number or robot or like something disposable. They don't at all care about the humanity that we have, that, people have kids or they have several other jobs to make ends meet, or, they love to play the tuba. I have a really cool organizing committee member who plays the tuba. And no one knows that. And that's because they don't care at all about us. And that's one thing that really resonates with people, because they are like, yeah, absolutely. I bring, experience and work ethic and whatever to this job. And, they literally just could throw me out tomorrow and they don't care. They would replace me immediately. And so that actually is something that kind of, it's both a kind of makes people a little bit more empowered and see each other as humans, and also treat their coworkers better and not view their coworkers as the problem when management tries to turn us against each other. But it also is a very agitational point. Like, people get, it's angry when you think about the fact that Amazon thinks of you as a number, and very much that kind of attitude leads to workplace injuries. And that's, very obvious. We've been talking about that at our warehouse. We have a lot of injuries. Our management even admitted to us that we have injuries every single day. And that's with them strongly attempting to try to get us not to file injury reports if we are injured on the job. So that's been something that's been helpful for us.
I was just wondering if there was any support from this white collar sector of Amazonian workers, like engineers and other white collar, supportive actions that people at warehouse did, like if there was a walkout or a strike, did they do anything to support it or not? And also, again, about, this is kind of another question, but also about white collar Amazonians. I was wondering how the precarity situation is in that sector, or are they also as precarious as warehouse workers and engineers, or not?
We, especially early on in the pandemic, we received a lot of solidarity from the tech workers in Seattle, especially, and they even did a series of online events where, because a lot of tech workers are really sort of constantly bombarded with this idea that by virtue of being tech workers, they're doing work that's intrinsically good for humanity, and a lot of them like really hold strongly to this image of like the work they're doing as, fundamentally beneficial. And a lot of them think Amazon is, a great company, and it's not universal, but a lot of them feel that way. And early in the pandemic, especially some of the Amazon Employees for Climate Justice folks, they hosted events to put us in dialogue with other tech workers, to kind of like reveal the underbelly of Amazon. And the goal was very specifically to sort of like start creating that shift in consciousness amongst tech workers. And it was effective. And actually, like, Amazon came down on them really hard. That they took significant risk in putting these events together for us, and they were very helpful. Garnered a lot of support, even financial support from tech workers. So yes, there is some of that going on. And the precarity question, a lot of tech workers are contract workers. Ones that are hired directly tend to have that better job security, but Amazon also does do a lot of that through contract work. So there's a degree of precarity in the white collar side as well.
If I may, I think I want to add that there is, while interclass solidarity is historically rare, I think there is something specific about this moment in time where not only the kind of technical or organizational connection between those who design the technology and those who use the technology in the workplace are very visible in a sense, but there is also something about the tech workers being more politicized in the last few years. So I think this also helps these moments of solidarity across the division of labor at Amazon and beyond. So the Employees for Climate Justice, the Tech Worker Coalition, which is a broad coalition of workers across different companies within digital capitalism, so from Google to Amazon and you name it. The Tech Won't Build It movement, so groups of tech workers who try to resist their employers providing especially surveillance technology to law enforcement or immigration agencies like ICE. So both Amazon and Google are infamous for that. So I think there's a very specific moment in time where these mechanisms may actually function more than in the past. We'll see where that leads. And then just to wrap this up, word in the street is that Amazon is a bad employer for engineers too. I mean, they make decent money, of course, that you can't really compare them, their conditions of work with an associate working in a fulfillment center. But certainly they don't live up to the standard those workers experience in similar companies. So I think there's also lots of voluntary turnover where people will go and work for Amazon for a couple of years and then quit and go and get a better job elsewhere. So Amazon is famous for not treating its employees not very well, even in the white-collar workforce.
So I want to conclude with a political question for all three panelists, reframing an earlier question posed by Jessica and Paul about the relationship between union and non-union organizing efforts. And I know that we've sort of complicated the idea. It depends on how you will define a union. But in the United States and internationally, over the past decade or so, we've seen this massive revival of democratic, socialist, anarchist, and communist political organizing. And so I'm just really curious to know, has there been support from organizations, from political organizations, from parties for these worker struggles happening at Amazon? And I just was really curious to know your assessment of that, what's working, what's not working. Is there a role for other organizations outside of sort of organizing workers at Amazon that could play a sort of supportive role and helping win these fights?
I guess I'll go first. I'm a member of DSA, and some DSA comrades have been very helpful. A lot of times when comrades are looking for work, if Amazon's hiring, they'll go work at Amazon and help us build the struggle. I identify as a communist and view what we're doing as a very political struggle. We use political education as an important component of our organizing, both in helping people feel a sense of connectivity to past struggles. Just next week, we have a event with our committees from 3 different warehouses where we're hosting one of the members of League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and we're talking about capitalism. So I view what we're doing as extremely political. I'm not trying to affiliate Amazonians United with any political group, but that doesn't mean it's not a political project.
Yeah, we in this area, we've been connected also with the local DSA chapter, which has officially committed to support our organizing efforts, although that doesn't necessarily mean, since we're not public as any kind of organization yet, the main work that they've been doing is kind of recruiting folks to get hired in Amazon and organize, because we aren't going to be able to do much just organizing in one warehouse. We need to have several warehouses around the area. So that's the main thing we've, at least in our area, that we've been asking allies to be doing, is finding folks that either are willing to go work at Amazon, or that know people that are working at Amazon that are already there and that want to be organizing with their coworkers and connecting it with other warehouses. So that's our main focus right now with other organizations. So DSA is one of the ones in this area, but I would say, like I mentioned earlier, there's a local organization in Baltimore that is a community kind of political party, and they, because they've been organizing in the community for a long time, they have kind of deeper ties in the community. And especially in the neighborhoods where there are a lot of Amazon workers, I say, we have pretty regular calls with this organization, and they themselves have several relatives that work at Amazon already, so it's connecting with Amazon workers is the main kind of stage that we're at right now. So that's been, I would say, our main kind of like relationship with local organizations currently. I know when we're public, there might be some kind of more options to support us, but I think it's just, very important to focus on the actual organizing. That's how we're going to build our power.